In this video, I will talk about the recent drama between WordPress and WP Engine. This drama has cast a shadow over the open source community. As open source software continues to power the digital world, questions arise about its true nature. Is open source truly open source? Is it a public good freely available for all to use and modify? Or is it a commodity ripe for commercial exploitations? Well, in this video, we delve deep into the ethical complexities of open source development. We'll also explore the responsibilities of maintainers, the impact of corporate influence, and the need for sustainable models. So I'll be exploring all these points while having a look at an article that I recently read on GitHub. Is this article, Software as a Public Good? I really like this article because I think that it fits very well into this current drama between WordPress and WP Engine. So before I start diving into this article, let's just remind ourselves of what is going on between WordPress and WP Engine. So, just to go quickly and briefly about it, the thing is that WordPress is accusing WP Engine of using the open source code while not contributing enough to that open source code. So, for me, this argument, there are two main points to take away. The first one is that WordPress needs more maintainers to its code. So WordPress wants to have more maintainers, also possibly more funds in order to improve the source code. For me, that is the first main point, the first takeaway of this argument. And for me, the second idea is that it actually is a question. Do we have to contribute to an open source code because we use it? There is an ethical point of view, but also WordPress is now adding a legal dimension to this question. And while we try to discuss about it throughout this video, and I will give my opinion on it, but also this article also tried to give us a kind of frame of reasoning around open source code. Well, it started and says that open source software underpins all sectors of the economy. And open source code is ubiquitous. We find it everywhere. And as such, this article says that the open source code can be estimated at 8.8 trillion of the world economy. I mean, that's a lot. That's huge. And the article that is cited here, I didn't have the time to read the whole article, but just having a look at the abstract, the way they came up with this figure is that they estimated that if all the code could just extract the open source part and then try to replace that by code written by developers that are hired, they could come roughly to that figure. Well, it's hard to estimate, but at least it kind of gives us an idea that the open source code, it represents a huge part on the world's current economy. This being the case, what happens when open source is under fire, or when open source code is threatened by vulnerability, or when open source stability is even at stake? For instance, with the current situation between WordPress and WP Engine. Some data suggests that WordPress is used by roughly 40% of websites in the world. I mean, that's huge. So which means that the current situation that is affecting WordPress and WP Engine is affecting directly many businesses in the world. We can even think about in terms of money. I mean, I don't have figures now, but maybe in the future, you may have figures about people that are impacted by this current drama between WordPress and WP Engine. So when open source is at stake, when the open source code is at stake, then it's the world economy directly that is at stake. And this article also talking about vulnerabilities, kind of mentioned some vulnerabilities in the past that had affected some open source code. For instance, Heartbleed that was aimed at OpenSSL, and there is Log4Shell that was aimed at Log4j. And Log4j is a popular library that is used by Java project, and almost all Java projects they use Log4j, which really shows how this vulnerability was pervasive within the Java community. And there is also this vulnerability that I also like to mention about XZ util backdoors. The reason why I like to mention this vulnerability because it shows that it wasn't the work of an individual, but possibly the work of a group of people that crafted the vulnerability over several years. Open source can be at stake. And when it is, then it's the world economy that is at stake. So we need to come up with a sustainable model for the open source code for both maintainers and also for consumers of those open source code. So how to do that? Well, I like this article because it shows that the open source even takes part at the center of the United Nations. Well, I never thought that this could be the case, given that open source at the beginning, it was thought to be something for a niche of developers. Like sometimes when we think about open source code, I would think about like geeks, some developers that has an expertise within some specific area of software programming. So that's what we thought at some point. But now, the fact that open source is taking center at the United Nations, it means that it has shifted from this from being something that is only for a niche of developers to something that needs to be embraced by all developers. I often say that open source code is code written by developers for developers. Granted, the open source code, for the open source code, there are some developers that are hired to write open source code. And then there are some developers that after their day job, they come back home and try to also contribute to open source code. So that's the case for some of us, where we have our day job, but then when we come back, we also want to give back to the open source world. Because I always say that all of us developers, we owe to the open source community. So that's why I was saying that, for the question, do you have to contribute to the open source code? That is an ethical part of it to say that, since I use it, then I need to contribute. But then we also can say, well, I need it for my company. So since I need it for my company, then my company is the one that needs to have a kind of framework to allow developers to contribute to the open source community. So that's why it's a very broad question, a question for which I don't have an answer, but a question that needs to be in a debate that all developers, they try to have. But now, coming back to the fact that the open source is taking center at the United Nations, it helps to say that now government are involved in the current affair of open source code. It could have other implications as well, but let's just stick to that for a moment. So government are involved, and what does it mean? It means that they will also contribute to open source code. They will make sure that open source code are stabilized when it comes to the fund that they need in order to keep on running. So Germany, they presented the model that they have to contribute to open source code. France as well, they have presented the model as well. We show that this government, they are deeply in this discussion about open source code. But it can also have an adverse implication for open source code. what I mean by that is that not because the government are involved, it underscores this question: is open source truly open source? Like now, government are involved, so we can expect in the near future that there will be laws that will be regulating what open source is supposed to be. I mean, these laws, they will really help open source to be better than what it is today. Something that has always bothered me when it comes to open source is that sometimes you have some open source code that are used by millions of people. This project, they are downloaded by hundreds and thousands of developers every day. And but this project, they are maintained by a single individual. But now, what happens to this project when this maintainer, this single maintainer, becomes ill? When he dies? What happens to this project when these individuals now, after a certain time, now he has other things to do, and then he doesn't have enough time to continue maintaining the project? Does it mean that this project will just be discarded just like that, waiting for another one to come and fork it and to continue working on it? And what happens if that second individual also, after a certain amount of time, is unable to continue working on this project? So for me, that's the discussion that we need to have upon open source code. And that's what I'm putting under the umbrella. What is the responsibility of maintainers? It's true. Everybody can start writing open source code. I take my laptop, and then an idea pops up in my mind, and I can start writing code, and after I just make it open to be downloaded by others. But then when this code started to be downloaded by hundreds of people, thousands of people, 100,000 of people, millions of projects started using that project, then what is my responsibility toward those people? Now, it's true. I can reason and say, well, that's something I only do on my part job. I don't have a commitment to say that I will continue maintaining that project. But don't I have kind of moral sense toward those individuals using my project? Now, what happens when there is a known vulnerability on the project? Could I say, okay, I only do it part-time, so I'll just sit down and just wait that somebody makes the fix? Or should I run and make the fix because I think that this is the project I've created, and then I have a sense of duty toward those people? So it's starting to require a kind of legal framework around open source code. And now that government we have their word to say in the matter, I think it will shape open source for the better. But then it will also, at the same time, it kind of puts some obstacle for open source code, because it will mean that maintainers won't be able to do whatever they want to do, because they will have to abide by this legal framework. And personally, I won't be surprised if within the next couple of months, within the next year, the EU start now to define a legal framework for what open source software is supposed to be. But now the fact that the open source is taking center, it's taking stage at the center of the United Nations, it really shows that now government actors and the economic actors, they are all aware of the implication of the open source code, and they will all have their word to say in making sure that open source remains open source. So now, it's public and private sector all working together to guarantee this future for open source code. You can see that there is more and more push to have more maintainers, to have more people contributing to open source code. One example of that is the good first issue. This is a label that you can find on many repo. The good first issue, it just is a label that identifies are the issue that you can start working on if you are joining open source for the first time, or if you are joining a repo or for the first time. So now, if you want to contribute to open source, if you just don't know when to start or how to start, where to start, just go to a repo, just look at the issue, and try to locate this label, first issue, because this label will tell you that, okay, this is a simple fix to make, and that's something I can quickly start with as you want to work on this project. And I start having a good comprehension on the repo. Then you can go and then do more PR to fix more issues for that repo. But then first, look at these first issues, and then it can help you to start working on this repo. So it shows that now more and more developers are embracing open source. I mean, that's good, but I think that the open source community needs more and more developers to get into it. I'm kind of confident that from the way things are going, open source will benefit more and more from developers, and then also open source will benefit as well from different sponsors, both from the private or the public sectors in terms of funds, because open source needs more funds to keep on running. We need not to wait until there is a null vulnerability before open source code are supported, because the implication that it has on the economy is just huge. So open source needs more and more funds, and now it's good that government are also trying to have their say to help in that regard. So I really love this article a lot because it shows the importance of the open source community, but it also shows the fact that open source has a lot of consequence on the world economy. And that's why economic and government actors, they all need to come together to help shape the future of open source software. I hope you enjoyed this short video in which I discussed how and why we all need to contribute to open source software, but also I showed the implication of the current drama of WordPress and WP Engine, the implication that this issue will have on the open source project in terms of maybe government officials looking in regulating more and more the tech sector, and also why as individuals, as developers, we also need to contribute, to give back to the open source software. So I hope you enjoyed this short video. Let me know in the comment below what you thought about this video. What are your say about the open source software, and what you also think about this drama between WordPress and WP Engine. Well, until the next one for another video.